Alright, David Harry here. So this M4 Pro Mac Mini is going back to Apple because for me it just wasn't powerful enough. So that's the bottom line answer to this video. It's going back because for me personally, it just didn't have the performance that I expected it to have. Now what I'm going to do here is just give you like a little bit more reasoning other than that, the one top line there, but that is the top line. Now for anybody who might be thinking about buying into an M4 Pro and you're coming from an M1 Max, you may want to listen to like my reasoning, or for other people who might be just interested in the M4 Pro for various reasons, this like video might be of use to you as well. So basically what it was, I've had an M1 Max MacBook Pro for like 3 years now, and it has served me amazingly well. And if the truth be known, there wasn't really any need to upgrade from it, and I think that will be a video that I will do at some point in the near future. Basically saying to people, if you've already got something like an M1 Max, especially the one with the 32 GPU cores, which is what I've got. Now, whether that's in a MacBook or whether it's in a studio, doesn't matter. If you're on an M1 Max with like 32 GPU cores and say minimum, well, the 32 gig RAM minimum, and say a minimum of a terabyte's worth of internal storage, seriously, you've got yourself a fantastic machine. And I think you might only know how fantastic it is like when you start like using other Macs which are like more newer, as in the M4 series. So what I'm going to do is just briefly explain like the slight disappointments that I had with the M4 Pro here. Okay, so as I've already established, I had an M1 Max. Oh, by the way, this is an M4 Max here as far as this MacBook is concerned, because I've had to get this now as my interim machine. I'm going to say interim machine. At some point, I hope to go up to an M4 Ultra if such a thing does come out within the Studio series. But right now, I needed to up my game. Or I thought I needed to up my game as far as like, you know, like power and processing were concerned and stuff like that. Hence why I'd got the M4 Pro here. But as it happens, I've now had to get the M4 Max because that's definitely a step up from what I'm used to using on the M1 Max. Anyways, as far as the M1 Max was concerned, like I've already said, 32 GPU cores, obviously the 10 CPU cores, 32 gig of RAM, 1 terabyte storage. Now, this M4 Pro Mac Mini here was like the bumped up spec version. So this has got like the extra GPU cores taking it up to 20, and then the extra CPU cores that go with that update as well. But on top of that, it's got 48 gig of RAM, and it's also got 1 terabyte worth of storage. Now, if I start looking like, you know, at like for like between the M1 Max that I have and also the specs of this particular M4 Pro, then, you know, we're kind of looking at something where it's like one machine has got at least as good options as the previous one, but better in other ways. So as this pans out, the only one thing which the M4 Pro and the M1 Max should have been level pegging with was with the GPU. So basically, whilst this has only got 20 GPU cores, each of these singular cores on M4 is actually a lot more powerful than what the M1 series of GPU cores is. So basically, 20 GPU cores of M4 should thereabouts equate, or maybe just only slightly come under, as far as 32 cores of GPU on M1 are concerned. And that's as far as benchmarks go. And this is the reason why benchmarks are just not the best way of looking at these things. You have to see these things like perform in the real world in order to get a true evaluation as to like, you know, how much kind of like increase in performance you are going to get from one type of processor to another type. Now, the memory, I've got to be dead honest, I've never even run into an issue ever with 32 gigabytes on my M1 Max, and I'm doing certain stuff like weird upscaling to 8K at 120 frames per second in DaVinci Resolve Studio, and it can easily do that with its 32 gig of RAM. In fact, when I was making a note of the RAM usage, it was in total 26 gigabytes of RAM in total, including system usage and also Resolve usage out of the 32. So still had like, what's that, like, you know, 6 or 8 gigabytes of extra RAM like floating around that it could dig into if it needed it. So the thing there is that my RAM usage, even doing completely insane upscaling upscale and stuff, and high ultra highlight resolutions and high frame rates, the 32 gigs on the M1 Max was easily doing it. So the 48 gigs on this was never going to be like ever touched, which for me was going to be fantastic, because I would rather have more and not need it than have less and need more. Do you know what I mean? So this was definitely always going to be good enough for the RAM. But then when we come to CPU, you know, the core architecture on M4 is once again better than M1, and we've got a lot more of it here within, like, you know, the M4 Pro. So this has got, like, you know, a lot more cores, which by the time you add them all up and compare that to the 10 that were on the M1 Max, you probably, well, you should be easily looking over like twice as powerful as far as processing power is concerned. Now just bear that in mind. The CPU power on its own should have given me a marked and noticeable upgrade, as it were, or something that I should have felt. However, in practice, when I was doing a bunch of my Resolve stuff, what I was noticing was some of the things weren't even as good on the M4 Pro. Now, here's one example for you. My preview monitoring definitely wasn't as good. It wasn't, it was dropping frames basically in the preview monitoring, right? So whereas I would get like a smooth frame rate playing back in one instance, say on the M1 Max, which can also still be a little bit problematic as well as far as the overlay is concerned, it was much worse on the M4 Pro, and it was more noticeable as well. So this is the problem that I was seeing when I was looking at the screen. Now that was only going to get worse when I'd go full screen, and also when I was using like the higher and higher resolutions and like higher frame rates, the problems were just getting way worse, to the point where it did look like a stuttery mess. Now it may not have been a stuttery mess, but if you're not maintaining a super smooth like frame rate for playback, you're definitely going to see it. And I definitely was seeing it on this setup, and that was also something that I could see at 4K 60 as well. So something that any of these Macs should be easily capable of doing. Now, as far as when I was like doing like timeline process and things to do with like color on top of like the rescaling and certain effects that I would use, I just didn't see any difference at all between this and the M1 Max, to be honest. And I really did feel that because this has obviously got like way more CPU processing power, there should have been an uplift in stuff to do with that as well. However, there wasn't. Now, it could be argued at that point that maybe the effects and whatnot that I'm using were not necessarily CPU based, but even if you're not using CPU based effects, the fact that you've got a stronger CPU in general should help you like smooth out like a bunch of anomalies during the edit process anyways. So even if the GPUs are meant to be, say, roughly the same, I still should have felt a bit of an uplift anyway on non-CPU tasks, just because the general kind of like housekeeping tasks are being dealt with on a much more powerful CPU. Now, in the mix there would definitely have been CPU processing going on, where, like, you know, the M4 Pro CPU definitely should have been giving me more of an advantage. However, I just didn't feel it. Now, again, you know, without going too deep into it, it just may be that some of the effects and the processing that I was using within Resolve Studio may not have been favouring the CPU so much. However, amongst all the stuff that I was using, somewhere in there, the CPU had to have been coming into play, but it just didn't feel that way. Now, although all of that was a bit of a grey area, and I was kind of thinking, well, I can't really feel any difference here, so is it really worth it? The one place where I definitely felt a difference was when I come to my like final export. Now the thing is, with the final export, the M1 Max is noticeably a lot faster than the M4 Pro here. Now at that point, you know, I know that some people out there will be thinking to themselves, well, hold on a minute, Dave, that's the end process, that's where you can go and walk away and have a cup of tea or do something, do you know what I mean, while you're waiting for the render. Well, you know, whilst that is the case, and indeed on any system, even the most powerful system that you've still got to wait for that export at the end. So you do factor that in, of course, and you will go away, make a cup of tea or a cup of coffee or whatever whilst it's doing that, or find something else to do in the meantime. However, and this is really the big point for me, the problem that I had is that I felt that I was accepting an inferior product and going backwards. So what you have to understand, for like 3 years, I'm used to like a certain amount of processing at that end post in order to like, you know, export the video. Now, at this point, you know, it just seemed like madness to buy an expensive computer, which was like, you know, 3-4 generations, whatever it is down the line, however you want to count it, you know, but definitely a much more like, you know, modern system. It just seemed crazy to go to a more modern system and then accept that you have to go slower in part of your workflow. Now, that is just something that I could not possibly put up with. After the first couple of exports that are done on this, it got that bad, and it was really doing me, I wanted to swear then, it was really doing me head in that much that I had to switch back to my M1 Max MacBook Pro in order to do it. And that was only because psychologically I didn't feel like I was being shortchanged, because the M1 Max was doing the export quicker at the end. Now, there's another thing here. When people go, well, you know, if it's only the difference, say, between 10 minutes and 7 minutes or something like that for a particular export, it's like, well, you know, what is the problem really? Because that's kind of like dead time. You're not actually physically doing anything. You just got to wait for that to happen. You could have your cup of tea. Well, the problem is, like I say, I'm just not used to going backwards at these points when I update certain things. And I'm not going to accept that, like, when I'm like up against the wall and I just want to upload a video as quickly as I can to YouTube, that I've got to wait longer for that to happen. Now, some of my videos are like maybe half an hour long. I've got a couple of tutorials coming up. One of them's over an hour. It's close to 1.5 hours long. Now, when you compound all that extra time that it's going to take to do the export at the end, that is definitely stuff that when you're not used to it slowing down at that stage, it really is going to do your head in, and it was doing my head in. So that was actually the final straw. So all the other things that I've mentioned where like within the timeline, it was arguable as to whether or not I was feeling any appreciable, like, you know, uplift using the M4 Pro. That last bit definitely was something that was quantifiable. It was quantifiably doing me head in. So bottom line, I've had to let it go on the basis that the main task that I use these computers for, it just wasn't giving me, or it was making me going backwards at the end point. Now, don't get me wrong, you know, I do other stuff as well, like say music, audio production and stuff, and this was just flying through it. There was absolutely no problem. But saying that, my M1 Max has never been taxed with anything that I do there. What it is, I use Cubase, so I've got like at the moment is it 14 Pro, then I've got like, you know, a load of Arturia suites, or I've got the main Arturia synth suite, and then FX5 for the plugins, and I've got various other things as well there as far as VSTs are concerned. Now, in amongst all that M1 Max has never broken a sweat on any of it, seriously. It's just been brilliant for it, in which case, so was this, you know, this was absolutely fantastic. And there's going to be a lot of scenarios, I think, where like the M4 Pro is definitely going to be something where if you've never, say, used a Max of any description before, you're going to use this and just have your mind blown, seriously. It's a very powerful computer. However, and like I've just said, for those reasons, it just wasn't blowing my mind. Anyway, I think that's probably the bottom line. And I mean, I did say from the outset that the short answer was it just wasn't powerful enough for me personally. However, my meanderings there have hopefully given somebody out there, you know, my thoughts and reasonings as to why it's not good enough. And also, just let me just go back to the point of like the M1 Maxes here. If you're somebody who's got an M1 Max, and that's regardless of whether it's only the 24 GPU core version or not, if you've got an M1 Max either in a MacBook or in a studio, I'd say to you right now, if you're thinking about upgrading, think really hard about it, because the M1 Maxes 3 years ago were just absolutely mind-blowing. And I'm going to put my neck out on the line here right now and say the M1 Max right now is better than a whole heap of the M4 series, okay? So you're going to have to go, well, probably to the lengths that I've gone to, which is to get an M4 Max in order to get something that's appreciably better. But here's another thing, you know, when it comes to that final export within Resolve, The M4 Max is only about 18% faster than the M1 Max, purely based on just like the encoding speeds. So if you're doing a dead straight transcode, it's only 18% faster, you know. So again, you've got to be really careful about what you're aiming at as far as what you think is an upgrade, because those M1 Max computers are absolutely awesome. And I'm going to say right now, you know, if it's lasted you 3 years, I think it could last you another 3 years. So if there's any advice to be had from this video, although it wasn't really about this, but I might do a video about it, and that is, the M1 Max truly is an outstanding computer. It was when it was released, and it still is now, and it will definitely hold its own when it comes to comparing it to a lot of the M4 series. So like I say, if you're somebody with an M1 Max out there, be very careful about ditching it, you know, to move up. If you can, try and see if you can find any proper real world examples of usage of like what you do being done on any particular M4, such as an M4 Pro. M1 Max is a no-brainer. It's definitely more powerful all round, you know what I mean? But it still might be too much, because you might not even need that amount of power anyway for whatever it is that you're used to doing on M1 Max. But like I say, if you can find somewhere, you know, any videos or any proper examples of proper real world, none of these stupid benchmarks, but proper real world use for the type of thing that you do, try and gauge from that wherever you can, whether that be worth it for you to go to, like, you know, any of the M4 variants from M1 Max, or indeed if you can get to borrow, like, you know, an M4 variant and then test it for yourself. Maybe that would be the thing to do. But anyways, yeah, I'm going to shut my trap here, because this is turning into giving people with M1 Max's advice here, which is not what the video was meant to be about. But anyway, there's all my reasoning and all the rest of it and whatnot. And for the right person, this is going to be an absolutely fantastic machine. It just wasn't for me. Anyways, if you've liked the video, please do give it a thumbs up. And if you're interested in some of the stuff that I'm going to be doing with a whole bunch of my Mac stuff, you may want to consider subscribing to the channel. I'm David Harry. Thank you very much for watching this video. Take care and goodbye now.